Hello everybody, A for Awesome here. Welcome back to another pretty long video. This is another of my musical documentary review retrospective series. I apologize for the quite a lot of time that it's been since I've really done any sort of consistent uploading. Right now, as you can see, this isn't really the best setup. This is a temporary setup in my apartment right now. Right now, we're currently in the process of setting up a nursery for our baby. And so right now, this is like the one part that's not like behind you guys is just baby stuff. This side is this side's a balcony. It's all very much my stuff is all packed away. So I had to take down my whole gaming setup. I had to take down the whole set. There's probably an echo in the background over here because it's like super empty. But as you can see by the one singular poster that I actually put up behind me, we are today talking about the legendary Prince of Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne. You can tell it's been a long time since I've uploaded and that I've been super busy because my beard is huge. I think this is the biggest facial hair I've ever had on this channel. And same with the longest hair. So much stuff has been like missing and such over time. Like I've just had so much. I wish I could give you guys like a full rundown. I kind of did that on my first stream back, but my point is that I'm continuing to try. Right now I've got an Xbox over there and all my Xbox games. And I'm hoping to do a big kind of retrospective video like this one on all the Pixar Cars video games. That would be fun. I've also got Tony Hawk and Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts and a few others. But yeah, I don't know why I'm doing this is my new hat. I don't know where my other one went. And I now have the matching Superman fit. It has nothing to do with the video. I just felt like wearing the Superman fit. But anyway, this is probably going to be a pretty long video with a lot of different segments in it and a lot of editing. And I'm kind of scared. But you guys should be very, very excited because we're obviously talking about a legend back here. And I'm very, very excited. You'll probably see throughout because I'm not doing this all in one long video or one day of filming. I guarantee the set will probably change, my clothes will probably change, my beard might appear and reappear, because I'm really taking my time with this project, and I really want to get this done right. And unfortunately, that involves a lot of different filming days, a lot of different things, because my main priority is focusing on God and being with my family. So, yes. So don't be like, be prepared that I might come in person in the middle of a video and just have no facial hair or different clothes or whatever, or the whole background might change. But yes, so as I said, you guys should be very, very excited. So get your lube ready and let's have some fun. John Michael Osbourne was born at the maternity hospital in Marston Green, then in Warwickshire, on the 3rd of December 1948, and grew up in the Aston area of Birmingham. His mother, Lillian, was a non-observant Catholic who worked at a Lucas factory. His father, John Thomas Jack, worked night shifts as a toolmaker at the General Electric Company. Osbourne had 3 older sisters named Jean, Iris, and Gillian, and 2 younger brothers named Paul and Tony. The family lived in a small 2-bedroom home at 14 Lodge Road in Aston. Osbourne gained the nickname Ozzy as a child. He dealt with dyslexia at school. His accent was described as hesitant Brummy. Osbourne was dyslexic and suggested that he may have had ADHD. At first, Ozzy shared a bedroom with 5 out of 6 of his siblings, and they had no indoor plumbing. His older sister Jean was like a mother to him, since his mother was always working. Up until 2010 at the earliest, but possibly even later, they kept an extremely close relationship, talking over the phone every Sunday. One time, his father wore blackface as a joke, and Ozzy was terrified. When drinking, Ozzy's father would often tell him that he would either end up in prison or end up doing something amazing with his life. An interesting piece of foreshadowing for the future of the Prince of Darkness. At the age of 11, Osbourne suffered sexual abuse from school bullies. Once, while in school, Ozzy was given an award for telling the teacher about a student that he witnessed attempting to kill the school fish. However, Ozzy had been the one attempting to kill the fish, only telling the teacher because another student caught him, and he wanted to avoid punishment, so he blamed the other kid. Ozzy attempted suicide several times as a teenager. He often participated in school plays, including Gilbert and Sullivan's The Mikado and HMS Pinafore. Upon hearing the first hit single of the Beatles at age 14, he became a fan of the band and credited their 1963 song She Loves You with inspiring him to become a musician. In the 2011 documentary God Bless Ozzy Osbourne, Ozzy said that the Beatles made him realize that he was going to be a rock star for the rest of his life. Osbourne left school at the age of 15 and was employed as a construction site laborer, trainee plumber, apprentice toolmaker, car factory horn tuner, and slaughterhouse worker. At the age of 17, he was convicted of robbing a clothes shop but was unable to pay the fine. His father also refused to pay it to teach him a lesson, resulting in Osbourne spending 6 weeks in Winston Green Prison. Prior to his arrest for stealing clothes, Ozzy attempted to steal a TV and dropped it on himself. Ozzy was attacked in prison by both guards and inmates for the way he looked. In late 1967, Geezer Butler formed his first band, Rare Breed, and recruited Osbourne to be the singer. The band played 2 shows and immediately broke up. Osbourne and Butler reunited in another band, Polka Tulk Blues, which included guitarist Tommy Iommi and drummer Bill Ward, whose band Mythology had recently broken up. Following the breakup of their previous band Mythology in 1968, Bill and Tony had been looking for bassists and vocalists. Ozzy's father had bought him his first PA system, something that, to this day, Ozzy does not know how his family was capable of affording, and it was the system that caused him to get his first gig. Unfortunately, the conflict between Tony and Ozzy commenced almost immediately in their working collaboration. Responding to a flyer that read Ozzy Zig needs gig has own PA, which was posted by Osbourne in a record store, Tony and Ward arrived at the listed address to speak with Ozzy Zig, as he then called himself. When Tony saw Ozzy emerge from the another room of the house, he recalled that he knew him as a pest from their young school days. Tony recalls one incident in the early 70s in which Ozzy and Geezer were fighting in a hotel room. Tony pulled Osbourne off Butler in an attempt to break up the fight, and Ozzy punched him in the face, which Tony then knocked Ozzy out. The new group was initially named Polka Tulk Blues Band, the name taken either from a brand of talcum powder or an Indian Pakistani clothing shop. Different members of the band have different recollections. The Polka Tulk Blues Band included a slide guitarist Jimmy Phillips, a childhood friend of Ozzy's, and a saxophonist. After shortening the band name to Polka Tulk, the band again changed their name to Earth, which Ozzy absolutely hated, and continued as a 4-piece without Phillips or the saxophonist. Tony became concerned that Phillips and the saxophonist lacked the necessary dedication and were not taking the band seriously. Rather than asking them to leave, they just decided to break up and form a new band. While the band was performing under the Earth moniker, they recorded several demos written by Norman Haynes, such as The Rebel, When I Came Down, and Song for Jim, the latter of which being a reference to Jim Simpson, who was a manager for the band's Bakerloo Blues Line and Teen Symphony. Simpson had recently started a new club named Henry's Blue House at the Crown Hotel, and offered to let Earth play there after they agreed to waive the usual band fee in return for free t-shirts. In December of 1968, Tony left Earth to join Jethro Tull. Although his stint with the band would be short-lived, Tony did make one appearance with them on the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus. Unsatisfied with the direction of the band, though, Tony decided to return to Earth. While playing shows in England in 1969, the band discovered they were being mistaken for another band named Earth, so they decided to change their name again. This name change would give rise to the well-known debate about the alleged aesthetic influence of Coven, which the British band always denied. A cinema across the street from the band's rehearsal room was showing the 1963 film Black Sabbath, starring Boris Karloff and directed by Mario Bava. While watching people line up to see the film, Butler noted that it was strange that people spend so much money to see scary movies. Following that, Osbourne and Butler wrote the lyrics for a song titled Black Sabbath, inspired by the movie. Making use of the musical tritone, also known as the Devil's Interval, the song's ominous sound and dark lyrics push the band in a darker direction, a stark contrast to the rest of the popular music of the late 60s, which was dominated by flower power, folk music, and hippies. Inspired by their new sound, the band changed their name to Black Sabbath and made the decision to write more dark music. The band's first show as Black Sabbath took place on the 30th of August, 1969, in Workington, England. They were signed to Philips Records in November 1969. They recorded their first single, Evil Woman, at Trident Studios. Evil Woman was released on the 9th of January, 1970. Later releases were handled by Philips' newly formed rock label Vertigo. Evil Woman failed to chart. The band were afforded 2 days of studio time in November 1969 to record their debut album with producer Roger Bain. Tony recalls recording live. We thought we only have 2 days to do it, and one of the days is mixing, so they just played it from beginning to end straight. On November 11th, 1969, Black Sabbath recorded a 4-song session for John Peel's Top Gear radio show. The 4 songs were Black Sabbath, Nib, Behind the Wall of Sleep, and Sleeping Village. Their debut album, Black Sabbath, was released on Friday the 13th, February 1970, and reached number 8 in the UK Albums Chart. And while it was critically panned at the time and failed to become recognized, it is now generally accepted as the birth of heavy metal. And now, the title track, the first Black Sabbath song. Here it is, folks, the dawn of what we call heavy metal. I'm going to do what this band and the people involved in creating this music were unable to do. They were too humble to do. I am here to say that this is the birth of heavy metal. Ozzy said, "Let there be metal," and there was metal. Praise Ozzy. Another masterpiece of a song that showcases Ozzy Osbourne's skills on the harmonica and many blues and jazz elements infused with rock and metal. Beyond the Wall of Sleep is based on a story by H.P. Lovecraft about a mental patient trying to communicate while dying. It's a pretty great song with an interesting message. Wicked World. A dark portrait of the world circa 1970, written by a frustrated young Ozzy Osbourne, Bill Ward, Geezer Butler, and Tony Iommi. It really showcases the frustration that these people were going through at the time, as well as all of the political and economical differences compared to 2026. A Bit of Finger. A track that is the end of the album, and while it does drag on a tiny little bit, it's still a worthwhile ending to a very classic album that I really recommend you check out. The band returned to the studio in June of 1970, just 4 months after Black Sabbath was released. The new album was initially set to be named War Pigs, which was after their song, which was critical of the Vietnam War. However, Warner changed the title of the album to Paranoid. The album's lead single, Paranoid, was written in the studio at the last minute. Ward explains that they didn't have enough songs for the album and that they just started playing guitar and bass, and eventually the song came out. The US release was held off until January of 1971, as the Black Sabbath album was still on the chart. Like Black Sabbath, Paranoid was panned by rock critics of the era, but modern-day reviewers have called it, once again, the birth of heavy metal. And now time to talk about Paranoid, starting with track 1, War Pigs, which is a masterpiece about the at the time going on Vietnam War and going against all of the topics. The second track, Paranoid, which is the title track, is once again a masterpiece, and funny enough was only thrown together at the last minute by just a last minute chill jam session, showing that these people, Ozzy, Black Sabbath, and many others involved with this band, can create gold out of literal nothing. on to Planet Caravan. A slower song with much more blues influence. It definitely takes the album in a different direction from those first two songs, but it's still incredibly enjoyable and a good experience to listen to. Fits right in, and like I said, while it is another direction, it complements the other two songs very nicely. Iron Man, a classic song that gets you pumped immediately, and you only need 3 words. I am Iron Man. Wait, this isn't an Iron Man mask. Hold on. I think they sent me the wrong mask. Hold on, it's got to be in here somewhere. Electric Funeral is our next song. This song is about the nuclear holocaust, which is a topic that the band would return to quite often. Still a great song, and not a very old topic at this point. Hand of Doom, another song not just about the Vietnam War, but disagreeing with war in general and greatly disliking the whole topic of murdering other people for political gain. I kind of agree. A very interesting thing about Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath as a whole is that while every single member of the band despised hippies and hippie culture and all that flowers in your hair, kumbaya bullshit, they themselves were very few steps behind it, as many of their songs covered very similar topics, just with a darker atmosphere. Next up is Rat Salad. It's an instrumental. I mean, it's an impressive instrumental, and I'm not somebody who only cares about the lyrics to songs, but I will admit that it doesn't really, it isn't as attention-grabbing as the rest of the album. And now the final track, Jack the Stripper, an impressive end to an impressive album. And I'll show you some jacking and stripping, all right. However, despite releasing 2 albums and touring throughout Europe, the band was not popular with women. At about this time, Ozzy first met Sharon Arden. After the unexpected success in the US of their first album, Black Sabbath began considering Don Arden as their new manager, and Sharon was Don's receptionist. Osbourne admitted that he was attracted to her immediately, but assumed that she probably thought he was a lunatic. Osbourne eventually recalled that the best thing about choosing Don Arden as his manager, despite their constant hatred of each other, was being able to see Sharon. However, in 1971, Osbourne met Thelma Riley at the Rum Runner, a Birmingham nightclub where she worked, and he had just played. They were married later the same year. During a gig in 1971, Tony Iommi was nearly stabbed by a Satanist, causing the band to continue to be worried about that public perception of them. Jessica and Louis Osbourne were soon born. Osbourne also adopted Riley's 5-year-old son, Elliot, from a previous relationship. Osbourne later referred to his first marriage as a terrible mistake. Me too. His use of alcohol and other drugs, coupled with his frequent absences while touring, took a toll on his family life. Both children later complained that he was not a good father. Jessica, in particular, was born on January 20th of 1972. Osbourne's first experience with cocaine was in early 1971 at a hotel in Denver, Colorado, after a show Black Sabbath had done with Mountain. Osbourne states very, 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 very vehemently that Mountain's guitarist, Leslie West, introduced him to the drug. Though West was reluctant to take credit for introducing Osbourne, he states over and over that that was who did it. In February of 1971, after a one-off performance at the Maiponga Pop Festival in Australia, Black Sabbath returned to the studio to begin work on their third album. Following the chart success of Paranoid, the band were afforded more studio time, along with a briefcase full of cash to buy drugs. Production completed in April of 1971, and in July the band released Master of Reality, just 6 months after the release of Paranoid, coming down to a whopping 3 albums over the course of 10 months. The album reached the top 10 in the US and the United Kingdom, and was certified gold in less than 2 months. eventually receiving platinum certification in the 80s and double platinum in the early 21st century. It contained Sabbath's first acoustic songs alongside fan favorites such as Children of the Grave and Sweet Leaf. Critical response of the era was generally unfavorable, with most people saying that, once again, Black Sabbath was just not that good, which is funny because now it's obviously remembered very differently. Following the Master of Reality World Tour in 1972, the band took their first break in 3 years, as they'd become very fatigued and tired, and after Master of Reality, things would never really be the same. And now, to talk about Master of Reality, starting with the first track, Sweet Leaf. Track 1, Sweet Leaf. This song is about the constant weed use by the band. Some people refer to weed as a gateway drug, which is only a half-truth. Weed can be used as a gateway drug, but only for people with no comprehension of common fucking sense. Weed on its own does not bring out an urge to chase a high or to use other substances. It is only a gateway drug for those with extremely addictive personalities, like Ozzy himself has admitted to having on numerous occasions. As someone with an addictive personality myself, wait, that wasn't... Let me try the other flavor here. That's better. Anyway, weed has never affected me to the point of of feeling like I need to chase a further high, and I have never used or considered the use of illicit substances in my life. Another misconception is that weed is not an addictive substance, which, once again, is only a half-truth. While it is true that nothing present in weed bought legally in states or provinces of Canada where it is legal is addictive on its own, once again, an individual with an addictive personality could quickly latch on to the high experience through it, and could end up using it in the same way as a crackhead uses crack, or, as my ex-wife uses crack. Most of my entire family and friends, everyone that I know, including myself nowadays, is a stoner, and honestly, it doesn't really do much. But there are some people who it doesn't really impact. Like, I know plenty of people, because almost everyone I know smokes weed, including myself, but I smoke it very rarely. It's been a bit more recently, but I'm not like someone who's like a huge enthusiast of it, and like I've never struggled with it. I know people who can't stand to not have it for like an hour, and that shit pisses me off. But I myself have never had that problem, personally. I did just pretend to have that problem for a bit, though, not gonna lie, just because I thought it'd be funny. I've been, like, taking dab pen hits throughout this specific recording. But yeah, After Forever. This song was written by the band after they became extremely sick of being referred to as Satanists, a cult, and all the other satanic panic BS that they were going through. Geezer Butler decided to write a song emphasizing a pro-Christianity message, and this song was born. Embryo. This song is seemingly about Ozzy's first daughter, Jessica, who was not featured in the TV show very often. Children of the Grave. Once again, another anti-war song, much like many of the songs from Paranoid. While they don't hit the same spot that a lot of the ones off Paranoid did, I still really enjoy them, and I think they're worth at least checking out once in your life. Orchid. A really great instrumental, very well played. The problem with me and reviewing instrumentals is that while I love instrumentals, I love, all of that, my biggest issue is that I really prefer songs with a deeper meaning. I will joke around and listen to some songs like Everywhere I Go or something, but I prefer my music to have meaning, and you can't put a lot of meaning into just an instrumental. You can put feeling into an instrumental, you can really try, You can sense if the effort's being put in, but you can't really put a meaning into an instrumental because there's nothing there. It's just noise. It's kind of difficult to play a symphony of music, even with a giant orchestra, and you can invoke a feeling, but you cannot really say this symphony is about the death of Mozart. You wouldn't know because it's just music. It's not, there's no words to it, there's nothing, and maybe that makes me stupid. Maybe I should be able to see something like that. But unfortunately, this song and many other pure instrumental songs just become duds for me because even though they're impressive and they're, technically well played, I find myself becoming bored with the fact of there not being any subject, anything to really sink your teeth into and think about after listening. Lord of This World. This is another song, seemingly anti-war, although this one actually leans as well into the pro-Christianity message seen earlier on this album, with many, many, many references to, obviously the title, Lord of This World, for example. Oh, what the hell? Who's calling me? Sorry about that. In the middle of recording, some scammer from another part of the country decided that they wanted to call me in the middle of my session here with you. And so it cut my recording. But as I was saying, the title, Lord of This World, and many of the subject matter seems to refer to a being above all that watches over all of us. It's Santa Claus. He sees you when you're sleeping and he knows when you're awake, of course. The next track, Solitude, is kind of a cliched breakup song. I mean, at the time it wasn't really cliched, I guess, because breakup songs were like the most popular format ever written. And then Taylor Swift came around. But it's, it's well written. It's just that compared to a lot of what's come out since, there's not much to it. But you can't really judge an album based on what's come after it, right? That's not fair. So for the time, it was really well done, but I think if I'm gonna pick a song about a breakup from this era, I'm gonna go with Led Zeppelin. This is not really something that tickles my fancy. But you can tickle me anytime. The final track on this album is called Into the Void and details the story of a man running away from a dystopian future. Many people actually call this song the birth of the stoner metal genre. And I do agree. I think that, Pink Floyd obviously has a lot of stoner kind of sound. Like, you can't tell me that if you listen to that you have to experience listening to Dark Side of the Moon or watching The Wall while like high, okay? But at the end of the day, that's not metal. Pink Floyd is stoner rock. I would hardly even call it rock. But this is the first song that I would call stoner metal. So I do agree with that take. It's a great ending for a great album, and like always, it's really an interesting evolution, right? The first Black Sabbath album invented heavy metal as a genre in general, right? We have things like Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, all sorts of interesting, things like that, but we didn't really have something as heavy as Black Sabbath. And the first song on that album, the title track, really seemed to invent the doom metal genre. And then Paranoid came around, and that really invented a lot of what we now know to be metal, right? And then this came around and became very focused on marijuana in particular, like Sweet Leaf, like I talked about. And so it's very interesting how each Sabbath album so far has kind of culminated in a new genre, right? We had the birth of heavy metal / doom metal, the birth of progressive metal or just regular metal. I guess there's, it's kind of, they came out, Paranoid and the original album came out in the same year, and since the original album came first, it invented heavy metal, but it was so focused on that doomy sound that I like to say that Paranoid kind of really invented the modern metal sound, and it was the first album that invented doom metal, or black metal even, and then, it all influences, it all kind of connects, It's just interesting that these guys are such pioneers. In June 1972, the band reconvened in Los Angeles to begin work on their next album at the record plant. With more time in the studio, the album saw the band experimenting with new textures such as strings, piano, orchestration, and multi-part songs. Recording was plagued with problems, many as a result of substance abuse issues. Struggling to record the song Cornucopia after sitting in the middle of the room doing drugs, Ward was nearly fired. The album was originally titled Snowblind, after the song of the same name dealing with the abuse of cocaine. The record company changed the title at the last minute to Black Sabbath Volume 4. There was no Volume 1, 2, or 3, so it was a pretty stupid title, all things considered. Maybe Volume 2 would have made sense if it was their idea of reinventing the band and doing a sequel, but that wasn't the case. Volume 4 was released in September of 1972, and while critics were dismissive, it achieved gold in status in less than a month. Following the Volume 4 World Tour, Black Sabbath returned to Los Angeles to begin work on their next release. Pleased with the Volume 4 album, the band sought to recreate the recording atmosphere and return to the record plant studio in Los Angeles. With new musical innovations of the era, the band were surprised to find that the room they had used previously at the record plant was replaced by a giant synthesizer. The band rented a house in Bel Air and began writing in the summer of 1973, but in part because of substance abuse and fatigue, they were unable to complete any songs. Ideas weren't coming out the way they were on Volume 4, and they became really discontent. Everybody was sitting there waiting to come up with ideas, and nobody could come up with anything. The cocaine usage got so bad between band members that the FDA began supplying the band directly, as a form of MK Ultra mind control. And now, onto the tracks for Black Sabbath Volume 4. Starting with Wheels of Confusion. Now, that's the first track off the album, and it talks about losing childhood innocence and the effects that losing your innocence can have on you, and the different ways that you can lose your innocence. Tomorrow's dream is about starting a new life and leaving everything behind. Just like I tried to do. Anyway. No way! It's the theme from Big Mouth! No, in all serious though, this is one of the most classic works that Ozzy has ever performed on, and a very heartfelt and meaningful song for Ozzy, which is interesting because Ozzy didn't write it. It was actually written by one of the other members of the band due to a breakup that was going on. So it's very interesting that it became so synonymous with Ozzy Osbourne, so much so that he duetted the song with Kelly. But who knows? It's very interesting how things work like that.
Okay.
Supernaut. This song is about living life to the fullest and really enjoying your time on this earth. What the hell is going on with my hair? Snowblind. As classic and awesome as this song is, and it really is classic and it really is awesome, my biggest issue is that it's a little too slow-paced for a song about one of the most famous drugs for getting you uppers, one of the most famous uppers, that I apparently am not on. But anyway, no, I'm not. But I think System of a Down's cover of this song is actually much better at showing the subject matter, right? You know, it's a song about being addicted to cocaine and doing cocaine, and the, I think the faster paced and then transitioning from very fast, very slow feels a lot more like you are feeling the high of the drug and then feeling the low of the dope sickness. So I got to give the point to System of a Down here, that I think they actually managed to improve an already perfect song. The next song, Cornucopia, is well known for its extremely troubled production and for almost causing the firing of drummer Bill Ward. And it really shows throughout this song, because I gotta be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of this one. This next song, Laguna Sunrise, really showcases the downward spiral of this album. It began with several near perfect masterpieces of songs, and by the end you can really just feel the band spiraling with their drug use. In particular, Ozzy Osbourne's vocals are just not on point anymore. St. Vitus' dance is taken from the biblical character of St. Vitus, who was known for dancing, and he was actually the patron saint of dancing. Unfortunately, there's also a mental disorder known as that, due to uncontrollable spasms in the hands, legs, and neck. Wait a minute. That sounds like foreshadowing. Why is my hair in my face like that? Final track, Under the Sun, is an alright closer for a decent album, but unfortunately, this just does not hit the same highs as Paranoid and Master of Reality. After a month in Los Angeles with no results, the band opted to return to England. They rented Clearwell Castle in the Forest of Dean. They rehearsed in the dungeons and many other places. While working in the dungeon, Tony stumbled onto the main riff of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, which set the tone for the new material. Recorded at Morgan Studios in London by Mike Butcher, and building off the stylistic changes introduced on Volume 4, new songs incorporated synthesizer, strings, and complex arrangements. Yes, keyboardist Rick Wakeman was brought in as a session player, appearing on Sabracadabra. For the first time, Black Sabbath was actually receiving positive reviews. The same year, the band shifted management, finally agreeing to a contract with Don Arden. This move caused a contractual dispute with Black Sabbath's former management, and while on stage in the U.S., Osbourne was handed a subpoena that led to 2 years of litigation. And now, on to Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, starting with the title track, which is an absolute classic and a return to form after the mixed bag we recently went through. The next song, National Acrobat, shows God describing his thoughts about life to an unborn child. As we were all born, we should all live our life to the fullest. The next track, Fluff, has an accurate song title, as it feels like nothing but filler. Afterward, we move on to Sabracadabra, which is another classic song that I personally love. The next track, Killing Yourself to Live, is once again fantastic. Another song afterward, Who Are You, is actually one of the first songs written entirely by Ozzy Osbourne. There aren't many songs during the Sabbath days written by Ozzy alone, as he didn't feel very confident in his songwriting capabilities. Paranoid was one of the only ones in which the lyrics were written entirely by Ozzy. I don't know how you can not be confident in your writing skills after writing such a classic. Our next track, Looking for Today, is a decently interesting song, but really lacks a lot of the oomph of most Black Sabbath songs. Our next track, Spiral. This song seems to be about maintaining hope in a grim, difficult world. The value of not losing perspective in life is very important. While the world can often seem like it is falling apart around... Fuck, man! Black Sabbath began work on their 6th album in February of 1975, again in England at Morgan Studios in Willesden, this time with a decisive vision to differ the sound from Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. They thought about going on and creating more and more technical songs, but the idea just bored them. The album they would eventually create was known as Sabotage.
so this is like, oh, oh, this is like low-key my bad. It's like 1:30 in the morning, and everyone's asleep, and I just now realized, because I couldn't, my insomnia sucks, I just now realized that I never actually finished this part, and I feel really, really dumb, because I was totally supposed to do this, and didn't, and I've just been so busy with baby stuff and pregnancy stuff, and that's about it, to be honest, that it just slipped my mind. Actually, it's been more than just baby and pregnancy stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I do. Like, I've been very busy. But I guess I should probably remember to do things more often. But anyway, the first track from Sabotage is called Hole in the Sky, and can have many different interpretations. It could refer to living in a prison and yearning to break free, or to ascending through a hole to get to the afterlife, or even to the apocalypse. It's regarded as ahead of its time due to its 12/8 time signature. The second track is called Don't Start and is another instrumental and not really my cup of tea. Thank you very much. That was my entire presentation. Well, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I'm going to try to sleep now.
Moving on to the next track, this track is called Symptom of the Universe, and is widely considered a proto-thrash metal song, just like Into the Void was a proto-stoner metal song, and just how the original first Black Sabbath song was a proto-doom metal song. This band is always improving, improvising, and creating many, many better things. It isn't thrash, but influenced many thrash metal bands like Metallica. The lyrics to this song are about a dream that Geezer Butler once had. The song starts with a very aggressive guitar riff. The song's structure and feel changes drastically throughout the entire runtime, by the end having acoustic guitar, piano, and soft vocals, giving Ozzy Osbourne the opportunity to show his incredible vocal skills throughout. Our next track is titled The Thrill of It All. The first two verses of this song show a nihilistic view towards the unanswered questions of life, such as the afterlife, finding meaning, the meaning of love, etc. However, the final three verses, yes, this song has 5 verses, shift to a carefree attitude, urging listeners to stop worrying and just enjoy their life. The next track, Superstizar, is another instrumental that is, once again, not my cup of tea. Don't get me wrong, as I've mentioned earlier in this video, I don't just enjoy music for the lyrics. I love technically impressive instrumentals, and I can even play some myself on bass. But it really takes a specific mood to want to listen to instrumentals, and usually I'm not in that kind of mood. And so usually instrumentals are just not my cup of tea. The next track is titled Am I Going Insane? And it is a common misconception that this song on Sabotage is a radio edit. However, the word radio in brackets in the title does not refer to the fact that it's a radio edit. It's actually a Cockney rhyming slang for mental. Radio rental, which is a slang term for someone who is insane or stupid. I didn't know that until I read this, for the record. I read this on the script. I did the research for this video. And although happy with most songs on Sabotage, Ozzy Osbourne did not actually like the response to Am I Going Insane or the previous track on the album, due to his implication that the two tracks were, in his opinion, pointless. The next song is titled The Writ, and Ozzy Osbourne actually talked a lot about this song in his autobiography, I Am Ozzy, which, if you looked at my Spotify Wrapped on Instagram, was the only audiobook I listened to. He wrote the entire song himself for the first time in the band's history. Obviously, Paranoid he wrote the lyrics to, and Who Are You he wrote the lyrics to. But The Writ was the first song that he composed everything for. After everything that he'd been gone through, as mentioned earlier in this video, including legal issues, family problems, addiction, and the stress of being a father for the first time, this song was his therapy, something I can relate to. He describes for the first time in his life feeling extremely compelled to just sit and write his feelings away. Once again, something I heavily relate to. Something he had never really done before. While he'd always loved making music, he never truly saw it as an outlet for emotions and more viewed it as just a dream job. This was the first time since joining Black Sabbath that Ozzy realized how much he actually enjoyed writing and creating music as an art form and a therapeutic form, something that would greatly reflect after his time in Black Sabbath had ended, as well as something that would highly separate his solo career from his time with Black Sabbath, as his songs with Sabbath were either not written by him or were mostly political or fictional, compared to his solo work in which almost every song had some sort of personal meaning to him. Black Sabbath began work for their next album at Criteria Studios in Miami, Florida in June of 1976. To expand their sound, the band added keyboard player Gerard Woodroffe, who also had appeared to a lesser extent on Sabotage. During the recording of Technical Ecstasy, Osbourne admits that he began losing interest in Black Sabbath and began to consider the possibility of working with other people. The recording of Technical Ecstasy was difficult. By the time the album was completed, Osbourne had put himself in mental health hold at Stafford County Asylum in Britain. It was released on October 22nd, 1976 to mixed reviews, and for the first time, people actually later gave the album even worse reviews. It has not aged well. And now it is time for what is probably considered the most controversial Black Sabbath album. Not in terms of it being of like the Satanic Panic and such, but in terms of like it is considered. Some people love it, some people hate it. You either love it or hate it. I am of two minds about it, and you'll see my opinion on Technical Ecstasy coming up real quick. Starting with our first song, Backstreet Kids, which in my opinion is actually a really great song about losing childhood innocence, as well as the individual childhoods of Ozzy Osbourne, Geezer Butler, Tony, and everybody involved, and the growth of them as friends and a band. You Won't Change Me is the second track, and is an interesting song about the life of a rock star and what has been going on with the band behind the scenes of the albums, seeming like a almost call for help. The next track, It's Alright, is the first song by the band not sung by Ozzy, as by this point in time, Ozzy had grown tired of being in Black Sabbath and had actually left the band, intending to leave permanently. Honestly, a lot of people think this song is overrated, but I do sort of agree, but I think it's a little bit too much like the Beatles. That just isn't the sound that I expect from Black Sabbath. I think that's a lot of why Ozzy had left at the time, as he explains in his book, and I think very, very similar to why he ended up leaving the band in the first place, is going back to the very first album with its doom metal, kind of the birth of doom metal, and then coming to this album and hearing things like the Beatles, and it's just, it is not the same group anymore, and I hate to like say, oh, shame on you, but it really does not feel like Black Sabbath. Even though it's old news by this point, it truly starts to feel like a different band when you listen to them back to back by comparison. And personally, I just don't enjoy it. I think it is underrated. I think that maybe we should have given some credit to the other members of the band a bit more than we did to Ozzy. But I still think that it isn't a bad song. It is actually a really well-produced, well-written, well-vocalized, well-played song. The problem is it's not a good Black Sabbath song. If you put this album if you were to make this song and give it to the Beatles or anybody else, it would be an amazing song. But the fact that it just doesn't fit with Black Sabbath, it's not what I want from Black Sabbath. The next song, Gypsy, is very, very similar to Evil Woman from their first album, but nowhere near as heavy or as dark or as interesting. Stand Still is the next track, and it has a really great guitar riff that makes the entire song feel super jumpy and fast-paced. Fast-paced. The next track, Rock and Roll Doctor, is unfortunately an extremely generic song and really honestly sounds like something from Bon Scott era AC/DC. Now, that's not a diss to Bon Scott era AC/DC. I've got a poster. We're going to ignore that. I've got a poster right here of Bon Scott and AC/DC. I love Highway to Hell. I love all the early AC/DC albums. But once again, just like with one of the previous songs, just because it's a good song doesn't necessarily mean it's something that should have been put on a Black Sabbath album. Maybe they should have written this song and given it to another artist. The next track, She's Gone, is a fantastic ballad about Geezer's first wife. And the next track, and final track of the album, Dirty Women, is pretty good. And in my opinion, I think that Technical Ecstasy is actually a very underrated Black Sabbath album.
Do I think it's perfect? Absolutely not. Do I even think it sounds like Black Sabbath previous? No. My personal favorite albums by them are Paranoid, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, and the first album, but I still think that this one is very good, and I actually have come to grow a new appreciation for this album that I didn't have upon first discovering this band.
Touring in support of Technical Ecstasy began in November of 1976 with openers Boston and Ted Nugent in the US and finished in Europe with AC/DC in April of 1977. Famously, while on tour with AC/DC, Ozzy Osbourne and Bon Scott would become immediately close friends. However, the rest of Black Sabbath would not get along, in particular the Young Brothers and Geezer Butler, causing AC/DC to be removed from the tour for attacking Geezer Butler. Shortly after this, Ozzy's son Louis was born to he and Thelma. Ozzy went on a drunken rampage at home, shooting and killing all of the chickens that his wife had bought him as a present. Shortly after, he would lay his hands on her for the first time. It wouldn't be long after this that Ozzy would get the news that his father was going to pass. He felt like he'd finally hit rock bottom. In late 1977, while in rehearsal for their next album and just days before the band was set to enter the studio, Osbourne abruptly quit the band. Tony called vocalist Dave Walker, a longtime friend of the band who had previously been a member of Fleetwood Mac and Savoy Brown, and informed him that Osbourne had left the band. Walker, who was at that time fronting a band called Mistress, flew to Birmingham from California in late 1977 to write material and rehearse with Black Sabbath. On the 8th of January 1978, Walker made his only live performance with Black Sabbath on vocals when they played an early version of the song Junior's Eyes. Walker later recalled that while in Birmingham, he bumped into Osbourne in a pub and realized that he wasn't committed to leaving Sabbath. Between late 1977 and early 1978, Osbourne had been recording a solo project behind the band's back known as Blizzard of Oz, a title suggested by his father. 3 members of the band Necromandus, who had supported Sabbath in Birmingham when they were called Earth, backed Osbourne in the studio and briefly became his first solo band. Osbourne initially set out to form a solo project featuring former Dirty Tricks members John Fraser Binney, Terry Horbury, and Andy Byrne. As the new band were in rehearsals in January 1978, Osbourne had a change of heart, put his solo project aside, and rejoined Sabbath. It was 3 days before they were planned to go into the studio, and he wouldn't sing anything else that Walker had written, so they had no new songs. While writing and coming up with ideas for Never Say Die, Ozzy would abruptly rush back to England to be with his wife Thelma as she suffered a miscarriage of their 3rd child. The band spent 5 months at Sounds Interchange Studios in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Oh, that's very close to me. Writing and recording what would become Never Say Die. It took quite a long time as they were really getting drugged out and doing a lot of dope. They'd go down to the sessions, pack up because they were too high, and then go home. Constantly. With the album getting the worst reviews of any Sabbath album to date.
Alright, and now we have arrived at the final Ozzy Osbourne era Black Sabbath album, Never Say Die. As I've discussed in other parts of this video, at this time, Ozzy himself had left the band and rejoined the band and fought with the band, and it was a mess. And this album, unfortunately, does heavily reflect that. Beginning with the title track, Never Say Die is Black Sabbath's 8th studio album's lead single, and it talks about never giving up. It stresses that there is no need to worry when the future can still bring great things, which fits with the band's situation at the time, as they were constantly fighting and unsure of their future. The drugs and alcohol were destroying their relationship, but they refused to give up. Johnny Blade is the second track and details the life of Johnny Blade, a knife-wielding maniac who lives on the streets. According to Geezer Butler, the song was actually inspired by Bill Ward's brother, who used to run with violent gangs in the UK. Junior's Eyes is the third track and was actually dedicated to Ozzy Osbourne's father Jack, who died in 1977, unfortunately never getting to see his son live out the Blizzard of Oz solo career. It was originally written with the new vocalist Dave Walker, who joined the band in between Ozzy's leaving during Technical Ecstasy and return after, But before the band could start recording the new album, Ozzy returned to the band and refused to sing it until he completed it. The lyrics are about a child whose father dies and him trying to live with it, but being unable to cope and turning to drugs and alcohol, much like Ozzy Osbourne's real situation at the time. Our next track, A Hard Road, was actually written by Geezer Butler and talks about the band's situation. Ozzy Osbourne's father had died, and the first verse continues what the previous track talked about and those themes, and the refrain spreads the whole message that the rock star's life is truly a hard road to walk. The song is also unique for being the only Black Sabbath to feature Geezer Butler on vocals, as well as Tony on vocals. Shockwave is the next track, and it's pretty basic, and really I'm not a fan. The next track, Air Dance, once again, really continues to bring this album down, as while it is very jazz and blues oriented, much like some of the songs on Paranoid, it feels a lot more like Pink Floyd than Black Sabbath, and while I understand that Pink Floyd was definitely an inspiration for Black Sabbath, as they came out prior to Sabbath's introduction to the world, once again, just like I mentioned on Technical Ecstasy, sometimes it's better to give a song away. Over to You is once again a song that I'm really just couldn't really bring myself to enjoy. It you could just tell, I could just feel in this song that the band was on its last legs. Breakout is the next track and is another instrumental, but this time it's nowhere near as impressive or as interesting as Rat Salad or any of the others. Swinging the Chain is a Black Sabbath rarity. This song was sung by Bill Ward, the drummer, because Ozzy Osbourne didn't want anything to do with this, as he was done with the band. The song uses war themes to talk about the band's situation at the time, as they were so close to breaking up. In particular, the chorus, "And we're sad and sorry, we're really sorry that it happened this way. Why'd you have to treat us that way?" is actually a call out directly to Ozzy Osbourne by the other members of the band, as he was already done. He had already told the band he didn't want to be involved anymore, and so this final song was on the final album that he was involved with had no involvement from him, as the album had to be completed without his help, as he was already working on the next album to be covered, Blizzard of Oz.